Michael Lewis, your famous finance author, can you explain how the FTX Ponzi scheme happened?
This isn't a Ponzi scheme. Like when you think of a Ponzi scheme, I don't know, Bernie Madoff. The problem is there's no real business there. The dollar coming in is being used to pay the dollar going out. And in this case, they actually had a great real business. If no one had ever cast aspersions on the business, if there hadn't been a run on customer deposits, they'd still be sitting there making tons of money.
What the f*** are you talking about? Ladies and gentlemen, today is the first day of Sam Bankman Fried's criminal trial, and already we have books, media tours going on about it, most notably from the finance writer Michael Lewis, who wrote The Big Short, Moneyball, and now Going Infinite, which he says is a letter to the jury about the true story of what happened with FTX.
You had so much access to Sam Bankman Fried writing this book. What ultimately is the purpose here?
I realized I had an ambition for the book. I saw it as a kind of letter to the jury. I mean, there's going to be this trial, and the lawyers are going to tell two stories. And so there's a story war going on in the courtroom, and I think neither one of those stories is as good as the story I have.
Now, I decided to read that story so you don't have to, because historically, these letters to the jury haven't gone all that great, and turns out this one is no different. I had to sit through hundreds of pages of Sam worship, a sycophantic 60 minutes interview talking about what a great business FTX was, and I was only left with one question. What is it about Sam Bankman Fried that makes smart people go nuts? Well, I decided to investigate. I wondered, is it the Bahamas sea salt air? Is it effective altruism? Or is it a $40 million penthouse? I think I've got a guess. Which is why I'm here, in the $40 million Bahama penthouse. Now, I know many of you have questions. How did you afford this? The truth is, I lowballed him with FTT tokens, and the seller was very motivated. So this will be my new base of operations for finding the truth about SBF. And we're going to start by looking at one of the last supporters of Sam, Michael Lewis. And yes, the coconut came with the penthouse. To understand this interview, frankly, the whole book, you need to know that Michael Lewis started it as like a positive story about Sam before FTX collapsed, right? It was supposed to be a crypto, like rags to riches story about how dreams really do come true. But of course, then they committed fraud and collapsed. And so everyone kind of naturally thought, oh yeah, he'll just change the book. Actually, kind of an interesting twist. Except the book didn't change. 75% of the book just doesn't mention anything about fraud. When Michael Lewis does get to the collapse, he just believes Sam Bankman Fried about everything unquestioningly. Like it's so bad that Sam Bankman Fried wouldn't even trust himself that much. Literally, Sam is quoted in Michael's book saying, and I do think this is a red flag, quote, "In a lot of ways, I don't really have a soul. In the end, there's a pretty decent argument that my empathy is fake, my feelings are fake, and my facial reactions are fake." Now compare and contrast that to Michael Lewis, describing Sam as, "The things he was telling me, all of which, I should say here, turned out to be true, was incredible." So even SBF believes in SBF less than Michael Lewis does. This man is a one-man cheerleader team. You've literally got the subject of your book saying, "I have no soul and my reactions are fake." And then the writer just goes, "This may be the most honest man I've ever met." Believing this requires so much willful ignorance on the part of Michael Lewis that it borderlines on malpractice. Take, for instance, Dan Friedberg, SBF's lawyer, who we explained has a history of covering up fraud before FTX. Does Michael Lewis mention this at all? No. Let me share with you some of the ways Dan Friedberg is talked about. Here's some quotes. In Sam's world, Dan Friedberg, in his early 50s, has been the only important grown-up. He was FTX's general counsel. He was also the babysitter. He'd sort of gotten swept up by the enthusiasm of the effective altruists. "I wanted to be a Sam," as he put it. And by the way, being a Sam was a huge compliment to Michael.
A lot of people wanted there to be a Sam. You know, there is still a Sam Bankman Fried shaped hole in the world that now needs filling. Like that character would be very useful.
What he represented.
What he wanted to do with the resources.
The irony here is, again, you know who is more skeptical of Dan Friedberg than Michael Lewis? Sam Bankman Fried. How do I know this? Well, I got an audio recording from Tiffany Fong. a reporter we've talked to before who's been talking to Sam.
Hey, Coffee. So, while talking to Sam in April, I discovered he was aware of Dan Friedberg's past, although he stops short of explicitly accusing him of committing crimes.
Well, everyone thought that Dan Friedberg was very clearly sketchy, so it was very shocking that he was hired at FTX.
So, he's an interesting guy.
Because what was he involved with? Ultimate Bets? Or something like that?
Yeah, it's something like that. It wasn't quite Ultimate Bets, but it's something like that.
And he was like,
I don't
his
remember.
reputation was like that he was really shady or something like that.
Yeah, he did have a somewhat shady reputation. He's a very good lawyer. He's extremely productive. He had extremely good instincts, and he would take care of problems that like other lawyers would not think to take care of or not know how to take care of.
So even Sam Bankman Fried doesn't try to deny Dan's shady reputation and said Dan would take care of things other lawyers wouldn't? Like, even the guy on trial is like, all right, I have to admit, he's pretty sketchy. So it's insane to watch Michael Lewis put zero skepticism into the characters of FTX's collapse. But then, watch this. Contrast that with how much skepticism Michael Lewis brings to the bankruptcy lawyer, John Ray, like the guy who's taken over the collapse now that FTX is bankrupt. Quote, John Ray expected to see evidence of a crime. Instead of answering the question, Ray launched a blitzkrieg of lawsuits against various people to whom Sam had handed money. The pleasure Ray took in whatever he unearthed was so infectious that I often didn't have the heart to say, I'm not quite sure that you found exactly what you think you found. So every step of the way, he's just like, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But Sam Bankman Fried, it's so unbelievably condescending the way this book interrogates everyone who had to clean up the FTX mess instead of the, people responsible. But worse, Michael Lewis casts himself as like the only truth teller. We've all been in the dark, but thanks to this man's mighty powers of the pen, he's gonna reveal the truth that nobody knew.
The story of Sam's life is people not understanding him, misreading him. He's so different, he's so unusual. I mean, I think in a funny way that the reason I have such a compelling story is I have a character that I do come to know and that the reader comes to know that the world still doesn't know.
Hey guys, you're being really mean to Sam. Don't you know he's really misunderstood? Did I mention what a good guy he is yet? He really cares about pandemics and saving democracy.
So Sam Bankman-Fried ends up with a portfolio heavily concentrated in two things. Pandemic prevention, because there really are things the government should be doing. And the other thing that made his list that was so interesting was Donald Trump. He took the view that all the big existential problems are going to require the United States government to be involved to solve them. And if the democracy is undermined, we don't have our democracy anymore, all these problems are less likely to be solved. And he saw Trump trying to undermine the democracy, and he thought Trump belongs on the list of existential risks.
I have no idea why we're talking about Sam like he's on trial for the Nobel Peace Prize instead of fraud. The part that annoys me the most is Michael Lewis doesn't admit the fact that for all the talk about giving, the effective altruism really didn't happen. You know what did happen? Paying celebrities stupid sums of money so he could hang out with them.
He paid Tom Brady $55 million for 20 hours a year for 3 years. He paid Steph Curry $35 million for same thing for 3 years.
Pretty good hourly wage.
He spent $100 and something million buying the naming rights for the Miami Heat arena.
I don't think so.
He spent $25 million making a Super Bowl ad with Larry David.
It's FTX? Yeah, I don't think so.
For which he then paid Larry David another $10 million. It's breathtaking what's on that list.
I don't know what's so breathtaking about that. How does this qualify as like, this guy's such an altruist? You paid a guy $50 million for 20 hours of work. And let's not forget, by the way, part of that money came from customers' deposits. So just understand, as we go into this court case, you're gonna hear some people try to say that Sam is an innocent, well-meaning altruist who bumbled his way into losing $8 billion. Of course, we all know that isn't true. And the people who are suggesting it, it seems are allergic to basic research and do not extend the same levels of sympathy that they extend to Sam to the actual victims, who they think are just gamblers anyways.
I could see people watching this saying like, come on guys, this is Elizabeth Holmes in cargo shorts.
Right.
And this is all a ruse, don't fall for the shtick, this is a bad actor.
It is a little different supplying phony medical information to people that might kill them. And in this case, what you're doing is possibly losing some money that belonged to crypto speculators in the Bahamas. On the other hand, this is not to excuse. He shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you kind of are excusing it. It was just a few speculators in the Bahamas who lost money. No, it wasn't. Regular people are owed money. That's kind of the whole point of this thing, partially because of all of those influencers who were hired, whether it be on YouTube, sports influencers. They weren't just appealing to the Bahamas. Those Super Bowl ads didn't play in the Bahamas, played in the United States, baby. This whole interview got me, as you can tell, a little bit steamed, which then made me read the book because I was like, probably the book's better. But that actually made me more angry. And it literally put me back to work on this case. I'd been working on a different project thinking, the SBF stuff is kind of open shut. The normal finance writers can handle it. But I was wrong. So I'm back. I'll be watching this case like a hawk. And, we'll be covering it for the $40 million Bahama penthouse. But I may even fly up to New York just to make sure there's no funny business. Make sure Michael Lewis isn't in the courtroom petitioning the jury for a lighter sentence on his baby Sam. Anyways, that's it for me. Case closed, 1 star.